Hi, welcome to the TTCAA's Department of Air Transport Economic Regulation, or DATER for short. We're going to explain a little about our role in the authority and the aviation industry. So what do we do exactly? Well, almost every state in the world has signed the Convention on International Civil Aviation known as the Chicago Convention. Articles 5 and 6 of the Convention speak to commercial international aviation and the fact that states may create regulations and issue special approvals for these commercial flights. This all begins at the state level, where each state will meet with another state or multiple states and negotiate an air services agreement. This basically tells you what an air operator registered in your country can and cannot do on flights to the other country and vice versa. This can include the number of airlines that can fly between the two countries, the routes they can operate, and where they can or cannot pick up and drop off passengers or cargo. The DATER is the implementation arm of Trinidad and Tobago for its air services agreements. If someone wants to operate a commercial flight to or from our country, they're required to obtain an approval from the DATER. If it's a non-scheduled or a charter flight, they must get a permit, and if it's a series of scheduled flights for the mid to long term, they must get a license. And of course, any approval granted must reflect the air services agreements in terms of what, where, and how you can provide commercial air transport. This is how the DATER regulates the commercial air transport industry, which statistically contributes around 96% of all flights that occur in the skies of Trinidad and Tobago. The only way they could have operated those flights was to be issued an approval from the DATER. So if there's an air traffic controller in that tall tower, and hopefully there is, the plane that they just gave takeoff clearance to was most likely granted approval by the DATER behind the scenes to perform that flight. Since we regulate commercial aviation, the government has legislated a dedicated set of regulations that govern the issuance of licenses and permits. That's TTCAA 17. We make sure to consistently research ways we can make the regulations more suitable and current, and propose draft amendments when necessary. In this way, we make sure the authority always has a proper legal framework to govern the implementation of Article 5 and 6, as well as those state-level agreements. With all those approvals issued by the DATER for commercial aviation, we end up with a capacity for about 12,000 passengers to be transported daily, with an average of 139 commercial flights. Since there's the potential for so many people to use air transport every day, we need to put things in place to protect them, because sometimes things just go wrong. How do we do that? Well, the DATER has legal foundation to issue approvals using TTCAA 17, but the regulations and the Civil Aviation Act also allow us to attach conditions to these approvals. The regulations themselves also specifically state what air operators must do in certain situations in order to take care of their passengers if there are lengthy delays, flight cancellations, and even denied boarding situations. Now, there are times when people may not comply with the regulations. To counter this, we do regular inspections to make sure that any commercial flight being operated is done so with proper approvals and is adhering to all the conditions of that approval. We do on-site inspections at the airports, as well as off-site surveillance using information such as flight plan data. If someone flew without having the proper approval, then it's an illegal flight, and we have to take administrative action to ensure it doesn't happen again. Illegal flights are a problem for the government, the air operators, insurance companies, and of course, the passenger. For example, if there's an incident or accident that requires an insurance claim, the insurer will not honor this claim if it is realized the operator was in breach of the law. There are all sorts of flights: scheduled flights, charter flights, commercial air ambulance evacuations, and flights bringing special cargo and dangerous goods. So we need to make sure that all of these flights are operated under the proper approvals. With air operators from across the globe applying for approvals, we also make recommendations to the government to have new or revised air services agreements. For example, if applications are consistently received from one or more operators from a state with whom our country has no agreement, we recommend to the government that an agreement should be negotiated to govern the commercial air transport between the two states. In addition to regulating commercial air transport, our regulatory mandate extends to economic aspects of the aviation industry. Based on ICAO Doc 9082, All states are required to have economic regulatory oversight over its ANSPs. That's where we come in. We provide oversight on the process used by the ANSP to calculate its rates and charges to ensure that it's in compliance with ICAO's policies. One oversight area is to ensure that the rates implemented are sufficient to recover only the pertinent costs of running the ANSP, which can range from salaries to ATM upgrades and any other ancillary or regulatory costs. If you didn't know, TTCAA 17 also specifies what the ANSP can include in its cost structure. We also report the rates of the ANSP to ICAO to be included in Doc 7100. We provide economic oversight on the billing process conducted by the Finance Department by highlighting any discrepancies noticed in this process so that they may be addressed. The ANSP benefits by having greater integrity in its billing process, and the end user benefits by receiving more accurate billings. Regulatory oversight is also done on billing queries as well as the debt recovery measures employed. The department conducts periodic economic reviews on the local and wider aviation industry and some of the core externalities that impact the industry. Every quarter we publish a newsletter with updates on what's happening locally and in the FIR. Every year, we publish an annual statistical report on international commercial air transport. For the authority's annual report each year, we compose the Global Aviation Economic Review and Outlook. As one would expect, to do these reports, we collect a lot of data. When we issue licenses and permits to operators, they are legally obligated to provide statistics to us. Some data we collect from air operators are the number of flights conducted, the amount of passengers and cargo transported, and information on any flight interruptions experienced every month. We also collect data monthly on flights within the FIR. We monitor trends in the local and global economy. Emphasis is placed on economic data from countries where traffic to Trinidad and Tobago originates. We usually collect data from our local Central Statistical Office, the World Bank, IMF, and WTO, to name a few. In this way, we can provide quantitative and qualitative analysis of what's taking place in the aviation industry as well as in our airspace. Since every state is mandated by Article 67 of the Convention to submit statistics from their national airlines to ICAO annually, the data provides this information to ICAO on behalf of the state. Some of the information submitted include the amount of kilometers flown, passengers and cargo transported, and even the amount of CO2 emitted. So, to summarize, what does the data do again? We regulate commercial air transport through the issuance of licenses and permits to air operators. We conduct inspections to ensure air operators are acting in compliance with the approvals granted to them. We make recommendations pertaining to air services agreements and our own Civil Aviation Regulations 17 and 13. We provide economic regulatory oversights as it relates to the ANSP's compliance with ICAO's policies and the billing process and the debt recovery mechanisms employed by the Finance Department. We collect statistical data from air operators, the ANSP, and economic data from agencies like the IMF and World Bank. We analyze this data to transform it into useful information, which is published in 3 different reports. We supply the relevant statistical data that each state is obligated to provide to ICAO as per Article 67. Now that we've briefly explained what we do, hopefully you have a better understanding of our department. So when you hear the term economic, the first thing that might come to your mind is money. However, economic, from our perspective, is much broader than that. From regulating the local commercial air transport industry to publishing various economic reports. We all have our role to play in the function of the authority, and each is important. The DATER would like to thank you for your attention and allowing us to explain our role inside the authority.